Hey, this is John from Alloy 211. Today's video is a comparison between the Hertiage Rough Rider 22 single action revolver and the Chiappa 1873 22 single action revolver. Now, if you watched my earlier video on the Chiappa, I definitely had some things to say about the fit and finish on the Chiappa, and I won't say that they were positive. In fact, they would probably be considered negative. And if you've watched my more recent video on the Rough Rider, I had some very positive things to say about the fit and finish on the Rough Rider. Although, as to which one would be the better purchase, well, that really depends on what you want to do with it. So we'll go ahead and get into that, and we'll get into some of the differences between the two guns. We'll start off with the fact that the Rough Rider has a smaller, thinner cylinder. The grip is the same size generally, as you can see, or as you can see, but the cylinder itself is quite a bit narrower. You'll be able to see that here in a moment when I take it out. And I compare the two. Barrels are the same length. Ejector rod shroud is slightly smaller on the Rough Rider. Now the other big thing to notice is the lack of a safety on the Chiappa compared to the Rough Rider. Also, if you notice, there's a bit more of a gap between the cylinder and the frame in the Chiappa than the Rough Rider. That's a pretty tight lock up there. I mean, although at the front it's about the same. Not that that really matters that much in these two firearms. Now these are generally around the same price point. The MSRP on the Rough Rider in this configuration, it also came with the 22 Magnum cylinder, is about $250. Whereas the MSRP on this Chiappa with just the 22 long rifle cylinder is about $199. The Rough Rider has a model that's closer to this, that its MSRP is about $195. But in all reality, both of these firearms can generally be found for quite a bit lower than their MSRP. I paid $188 for this. I paid $80 for this. Now, it was used when I purchased it, but almost new. The person who had it did not shoot it much, as evidenced by some of the things that I did to the gun. Or I had to do to the gun, or I felt I had to do. Now, as I said, this is much closer in size to the original 1873 compared to the Rough Rider. Rough Rider being narrower and with that safety doesn't quite approximate that 1873. So if you're looking for something to, say, really replicate the 1873's handling, something you wanted to shoot in 22 opposed to, say, your 1 in 45 Colt or 4440 or something of that nature, this would definitely approximate that gun a lot closer than the Rough Rider, or even that Vaquero I just had a second ago. And that is because opposed to the Vaquero, this actually functions in the same way with loading. You put it to half cock, you open up your loading gate, and you clear your shells. Which is the same as the Rough Rider, but the Vaquero, being a Ruger, operates differently. Which I have a video also about the difference between the way a Ruger operates compared to a more traditional single action. So, overall, Chiappa definitely better to replicate the 1873 than the Hertiage Rough Rider. Now, one of the things I really like about the Rough Rider compared to the Chiappa, it actually comes back down to the cylinder. And that is the cylinder in the Hertiage Rough Rider is made out of steel. Let's go ahead and pull this out real quick. Now, if you do this right, you can just get the pin out and leave it in tension, so that way it doesn't come all the way out and fall into the table, and still remove the cylinder. Hey, look at that. I did it. Let's go ahead and pull the cylinder out of the Chiappa, however you want to pronounce it. I'm not really that hung up on pronunciation. Nobody pronounces my last name right, so can't get too hung up on those sorts of things. Now let's go ahead and take our G magnet, G for gun. Chiappa cylinder is alloy with liners. Rough Rider cylinder, steel. And now, granted, I'm not saying that I prefer this because of strength. I believe this is probably just as strong and will handle the 22s just fine. What bothers me about it is wear. And while we're talking about where the wear is, sounds like a Doctor Who book. A Dr. Seuss book, or Doctor Who possibly. The wear is on the cylinder lock right here. Let me go ahead and move these so we can get good focus. These cylinder lock notches. Now in the steel cylinder, I really am not worried about this ever wearing out in the lifetime of the gun. Other parts will probably fail before that does. But on the Chiappa, given that this is made out of the same alloy the frame is, you'll notice it's starting to get wear right in those lock notches. Right there. And there. And there. And another. You know, as you can see, it's just starting to get bumped up just a little bit. So over time, that definitely could wear out or could become a problem. So I don't really care for that. And again, fit and finish, not to bring it up too many times to compare the two, but when you look at the back of the cylinder, one, you can see just the difference in size between the two. It's quite a bit smaller than the Chiappa, but it's a much more nicely machined. And as you can see, these inserts, they're not even all flat to the back of the cylinder. And that can become a bit of a problem with ejecting casings. Sometimes they get stuck because of that. So, but again, that's a fit and finish problem, not really a big problem. The gun will function, it works just fine, but it's kind of a pain. Another pain with the cylinder on the Chiappa, if this were a convertible, a combo gun, you would have another cylinder like this, much like I do with the Hertiage 22 Magnum cylinder, but you also have this sleeve that goes into the center of the cylinder. So it's something to lose, something else to worry about, whereas you don't have that on the Rough Rider. You just have cylinders. So that is definitely something I'd prefer. But, you know, again, back to the fit and finish. Rough Rider, looking really good on that. And I'm not just talking because it has the fancy grips of the faux case hardened frame. It's also, you know, just, it's all tight, no sort of casting marks on anything. It all just looks really nicely cleaned up. You know, I didn't have to remove any material from the rear sight like I did on the Chiappa. When I first purchased this, and one of the reasons why I think the person probably didn't shoot it a whole lot was because this rear sight was blocked by overmold material, just extra material that was in there. I had to take a small file and clean it out. So although I actually think the sight picture on the Chiappa is better than on the Rough Rider. As you can see, you got a little bit of a seam mark from the casting, a little bit of grinding. I don't really care for the way the muzzle looks on the end of the Chiappa with the insert compared to the nice crowned muzzle on the Rough Rider. So the other thing that really I didn't care for with the Chiappa when I first purchased it was the trigger. It had a big casting ridge right in the center, and when you shoot it, it felt like you're shooting a cap gun. So actually some of my son's cap guns have had better feeling triggers than that. So I had to take a file and smooth it all down, kind of flatten it out, and it's pretty decent now. But you look at the Rough Rider, and it has a nice, flat, wide trigger right there from the factory, centered in the frame. Something else to be noticed about the Chiappa, comparatively, is that its trigger is offset in the frame to one side. So it's not a big deal, but it is a little bit, just not quite as nice as having the nice wide trigger in the center of the frame. But when it comes to overall opinion of the two firearms, my overall opinion is that if you want a 22 single action that closely replicates the size and the handling of an original 1873, I would go with the Chiappa, honestly. And really, if you wanted to train somebody on an original single action, I'd also go with the Chiappa. So if you're using this to train yourself or someone else in the handling and the size and the weight and all that of an original gun, the Chiappa is the way to go, given that they're about the same price point as the Rough Rider. Now, if you wanted a 22 that you're going to say use around your property, carrying a holster, all that sort of thing, you don't really care about the fact that it has that safety, then you know what, go ahead and get the Rough Rider. The fit and finish on it is nice, it looks nice. You know, and honestly, if you're somebody that cares about that, you're somebody that really wants to have the nicer looking gun, then the Rough Rider is the way to go. For me, you know, whether it looks nicer or whether it functions better is really where I'm concerned. And in some ways, I like the functionality of the Chiappa better. You know, it's got a wider loading gate. It's definitely a lot easier to get those 22s in there. You know, there's lots of room in there, lots of room for your finger, plenty to get down in there. So when you compare that to the Rough Rider with its little diminutive little slot and a little ridge on the cylinder, and I mean, I don't have super big fingers here, but they are still, yeah, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. So, you know, depending on what you want, and that's kind of, you know, that's kind of the safe answer. Well, depending on what you want, buy what you like. So that's the safe answer, and I can't say much because I purchased both of them. Part of that to do a comparison between the two, and part of it because they both serve a different function. My son honestly really prefers the Chiappa. When we took him out and shot, when we took both of them out and were shooting them, he still preferred the Chiappa to the Rough Rider. So again, you know, his opinion is, I don't know, he's 9, but he has shot the Chiappa a lot. He only shot the Rough Rider a little bit, but he still preferred this. As for me, shooting them, they're generally the same. This is definitely easier for loading and unloading. But if I were going to have one that I want to take around my property, I would probably have the Rough Rider with the 22 Magnum cylinder, so I could practice with the long rifle and then use this when I'm going around my property. Although, even though it does have the safety, it does say that you should not carry it with all 6 chambers loaded, and you should keep the hammer over an empty chamber just like any other single action. So overall, closer replica of the original, probably better for working with, you know. So that's my opinion. I'm sure other people will have other opinions that differ than mine, but that's the great thing about YouTube and the great thing about opinions. We can all have them and all share them, and I'm always glad to hear your guys's. So if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you watch some of my other videos and you enjoy those too, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. So have a great day, and thanks.